Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karen Trivett, and I'm an archivist. And this is another episode of An Archivist's Tale, a podcast created by my husband, Jeff Huth, and me. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Karen. Welcome to the middle of the far end of the middle of the pandemic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a joy to be back here with you under these circumstances.
Yes. I should say, ladies and gentlemen, that for just a tiny bit of time, maybe 3.5 months, we have not recorded a single video or audio track for this podcast, which is remarkable because we were a weekly show for years.
Yes.
And so it is interesting how the pandemic can wear you down. But don't worry, we're not worn down anymore. We're worn all the way back up. Reinvigorated. And we thank our guests for that.
Yes. And just to preface their introduction, I want to let our listeners and viewers know it is 5:07 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, September 17th, 2020. So, anything else you want to say at this point?
No.
All right. Without further wait or ado, I would like to ask our guests, plural, to introduce themselves.
Okay, I'll go first. I'm Molly Tighe. I am the archivist and public services librarian at Chatham University in Pittsburgh.
And I'm Matt Strauss. I'm the director of library and archives at the Heinz History Center.
Welcome to you both. And it's also worth mentioning that we do have two guests today. This is part of our 2x2 series where we interview archivists who are related in some way to each other. And in this case, we have a beautiful married couple. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I'll just dive right in. Would each of you just tell our viewers, what is your archivist origin stories, each of you?
Okay. Can I go first?
Sure.
All right. I have what probably is a pretty familiar origin story. My undergrad was I did a double major in history and English lit, which was a lot of fun, but it didn't necessarily prepare me for something specific. And so after I finished my undergrad, I thought a bit about law school, and I was just sort of working jobs at the time. Right before my last job before library school, I was accounts payable at a masonry company.
Wow.
Yeah. and so I felt really disconnected from my interest in history and culture and art. And I started volunteering at a small photography museum in Pittsburgh. And it's a great little museum. And before I knew it, I was finding out about archives and learning about the profession. And there's a graduate program a couple blocks from where I live, and I'll go talk to some people there. And before I knew it, I was enrolled. So I got I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and there's at the time, there was a specialization that was in archives and records management. It's changed a little bit now, but did the program there, and started working here in Pittsburgh not too long after. My first position was at the Andy Warhol Museum.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really cool project. It was so Warhol put together these time capsules.
Yes. There were many of them.
There's like 600 of them. Yeah, most of them are boxes. There's a whole bunch of them that are file cabinet drawers. He saw Yoko Ono's filing system and got inspired, and so from boxes to drawers. And so that was a grand project. And the gig was that we opened up a box and organized the stuff within it and described it and put it back. And then the materials would be used in exhibits, all kinds of stuff. The day-to-day work was there was a lot of detail. You know, like if we found a box that was a box filled with 600 Andy Warhol Enterprise business envelopes, then we would have to write a number on the corner of each and every envelope. And it was an art object, but an individual item. So it was sort of a very interesting sort of merging of art object archives. Very, very, very Warhol-y, that we were sitting there with like white gloves on and writing tiny little numbers on a box full of standard business envelopes.
Gosh.
Yeah, but that was really cool, and then I worked there for about 3 years on that project. And then for about 4 years, I had 2 part-time positions. I was the archivist at the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra, and that was a part-time position, and at the Mattress Factory Contemporary Art Museum in Pittsburgh. So I had 2 part-time positions. Both of those were the archives departments were small. I mean, it was only a part-time position, plus very new departments. So very much trying to get things off the ground. And then I've been at Chatham University, made the jump to academia in 2014.
Very cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we tell you, we've seen some of those Warhol boxes because we went to Pittsburgh a few years ago for the Warhol / how do I forget his name, Halston show.
Oh, nice.
Which was for me a very interesting show, especially since I love the Halston stuff more than the Warhol stuff, which was a surprise to me. But they did have some of those boxes out, and I knew of them for decades. But to see them and to see how crazy they were was just amazing. And somebody was talking to us about the management of them, but I just can't conceive of it because you're doing this microscopic item level inventory of them. But it is a good thing too because that helps you to protect yourself from theft.
Absolutely. But yeah, it was definitely you really didn't know what you were going to find when you opened a box, and they're art objects. One of the highlights of that position was that because they were art objects and it's Warhol and they're of interest, a lot of the materials in that museum travel a lot, and so I got to go on a courier trip when it was awesome. I went to Seoul.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was the end of a show. And so there was some archival material that needed to be packed up and do condition assessments and bring it. It was the end of the show, so bring it back. But yeah, it was pretty cool. We got to help out a bit when other shows would come in, and if there was a display of some of the archival materials, we got to do some work setting up the cases, and that was actually a very good introduction to exhibit work.
Yes.
I hadn't really done much exhibit work. I didn't really expect to be working in a museum, so that was one of the cool things about it.
Awesome. Great. Matt, what is your origin story?
All right. So I kind of see this as there being two parts to my origin story. And I guess it begins in Japan, where I was teaching English in a city called Kofu, which is maybe about an hour from Mount Fuji, 3 hours from Tokyo. And it was actually my second stint teaching English in Japan. I like Molly, was working jobs after graduating with my undergraduate degree from Ithaca College. I had a politics degree, which was kind of like a liberal arts, which didn't really qualify me for much. In particular, I had some temporary jobs. I was had some retail jobs, and then I heard from a friend about these schools in Japan where you can go over and teach English as a conversation. And so I went over there, and my first stint was in outside of Osaka, Japan, and had a great time kind of meeting folks there, meeting other English teachers and Japanese students, and traveling Japan and other parts of Asia. And then I came back to the United States and was again like kind of bouncing around with temporary jobs, and thought, well, let's go back to Japan. And so I ended up teaching at a junior high school, and it was fine. Working in the Japanese school system, the students weren't always really motivated to learn English, and I was the only native speaker there, and I was working alongside a Japanese English teacher. So there was not a whole lot of creativity I could have in the class. And it was then when I thought, well, I think I've kind of gotten to the end of this particular chapter of my life. And it was a great experience, but I was mainly doing it to travel. And I briefly thought about, maybe getting a master's in teaching English as a second language, but it wasn't really, I wasn't that into the work itself. It was really fun to travel and meet people. But so when I was coming back to the United States that time, I knew I had to have a plan. I couldn't just go back and, expect to find some great job. I needed to figure out what I wanted to do. And so I remember before leaving Japan, just sitting down at a laptop and on a Saturday and boiling some coffee and deciding I needed to figure it out today. I'm like, what am I going to do?
Wow.
And I remember like really quickly coming upon library science and finding the program at Pitt. I was still a Pennsylvania resident, so I could get in-state tuition at Pitt. So I was looking into that. And then I saw that you could specialize in archives, and that sounded just kind of cool. I didn't have really much experience at all using archives or visiting archives or anything like that. I certainly went to my college library and spent some time in there, and I just liked the environment. And I worked at a bookstore, and I liked books. And so I liked history too, and this seemed like a merging of the two. And I suppose like the only real personal connection I had to archives was just family archives. And I had a grandfather who was had Alzheimer's disease, and so I never really got to know him, but I had some diaries from him and some letters that my father was keeping, and so that was like a way I kind of got to know him, and by looking at those records. But other than that, it was kind of a shot in the dark. I really didn't know if I was going to like this, and it probably wasn't until I got to Pitt and started taking classes. But really, when I had my internship that year, it was at the University of Pittsburgh Archives, and I was working on some really cool stuff. They had something called the Darlington Memorial Library, which maybe you know of the Cathedral of Learning on University of Pittsburgh's campus, kind of a skyscraper / classroom.
Gothic tower.
Right.
There was a library in there that was essentially the the personal collection of a 19th century antiquarian collector, and so that had been donated to the university in the 20s. And when I was an intern there, so this is mid 2000s, they were finally kind of really integrating all those collections into the broader university library system. And so they were closing down that library, which was kind of neat to look at, but it was not, didn't have the best security and environmental conditions, and it wasn't very accessible. So they're moving everything out to this, the Archive Service Center, which is out in a neighborhood called Point Breeze in Pittsburgh. And we were either reprocessing those collections or processing them for the first time and digitizing them. And it was stuff from colonial era Pittsburgh through the Civil War. And so the first collection I worked on was fascinating papers from this 19th century politician. And so there's letters in there from Henry Clay and Andrew Jackson and national figures. And I just remember thinking as an intern, like, why are they letting me touch this stuff? Why? And then my collection after that I was working on was from William Pitt, the namesake of Pittsburgh. They ended up with some of his personal papers. And again, it just felt strange that I was like being allowed to work on that. But little did I know that wasn't like the typical kind of thing in the process. And so that was like when I kind of felt a real connection to the profession. And also, that was kind of when I first started working with information technology. I didn't have a computer science background or anything, but what they were doing at Pitt was creating EAD for all these finding aids. And this was before the days of Archivist Toolkit and ArchiveSpace, when you kind of had to do it by hand. Another intern that was working there was a computer science major, and he kind of developed this computer Perl script that would run through a container list and spit out EAD. And so after he left, I was kind of like tweaking that and figuring out things. And I thought that was really cool. And I was working on XSLT style sheets, so how these finding aids would get transformed for online display. And so it was like this, on one hand, working with like really old, cool material, and also to me, what was sort of like cutting edge technology, like computer programming and XSLT style sheets. And that combination of things, that really sparked my interest. And I realized that I had this ability to kind of like sit down with a technical problem and like bang my head up against it long enough until it came. And and that's been something that I've maintained an interest in throughout my career. So after graduating, I ended up volunteering at the Heinz History Center, which was founded in 1879 as the Historical Society of Western Pennsylvania. And it sort of had a similar type of collection as the Darlington Library. It's a regional collection of manuscripts and photographs, but a much expanded collection. And so my internship kind of nicely set me up to work there. I started off volunteering, and then I got put on a grant, and then another grant, and I've had a couple of different roles there over the years. So now I've reached the pinnacle. There's nowhere else to go from here. So it's been,
but it's new.
Yeah, it's new. It's a new challenge, and certainly right now it's a challenge. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing. And you said it was just 2 weeks ago that you got this opportunity.
Yeah. So my former boss, John-PaulDeley, he retired in April, and then I was promoted to that position just a few weeks ago.
Well, congratulations again.
We should interview John Paul. You should give me his contact information because then he'll yell at me about this one decision I made about a grant years ago. And it'll be fun to record it because he's done it so many times. I'm actually going to record it.
Yeah, he still tells that story.
Oh, if I ever see him, that's like the second thing he says.
Oh, boy.
Last time I saw him was when the Mid-Atlantic Regional Archives Conference met in Pittsburgh, and I'm at the Heinz Center, and all of a sudden some big orange featured man comes running at me, and I said, "John Paul." So it'll be great. He was a fun guy to work with.
Yeah,
that was for sure. So here's something that I think we should ask before we go to our regular questions, which is, what is, and Matt's the one who made me think of it. I don't know why it's not on my mind. What is happening with you guys? What are you guys doing in your work nowadays based on this pandemic?
Yeah, I'll go first. So I am working mostly from home. I go in about once a week. The university, like a lot of universities, was planning to do in-person instruction pretty much up until maybe July, when more and more people were expressing interest in having expanded virtual learning options. So currently there are students living on campus. There's a lot of social distancing in place, and a lot of people are working remotely. And at first, I think a lot of people. I think people would have thought, well, how can you be an archivist and how can you work from home? You're separated from your collections. But so much of my work is digital. I'm working with digital projects and databases and providing access to digital material and doing outreach and trying to set up my collections so much to sending things up to support remote learning or to support digital access. And I was doing that otherwise, but it's even more important now. So one thing in the library, we have me and the rest of the staff have been spending a lot of time thinking about how we are going to provide physical access to the space and implementing new procedures about certainly wearing masks, but then what do we do if somebody isn't wearing a mask? What are the reporting procedures?
Right.
When some people have to get temperature checks when they come onto campus, and so they have to show, an ID and a temperature check and a new seating reservation system, thinking about changing ingress and egress from the building and going through all sorts of different strategies and procedures to adapt to this new environment. And at this point, most of the reference that I'm doing, and my patron community is mostly a lot of institutional users, the staff, the administration, and external researchers, as well as students. But I'm trying to implement some enhanced reference, trying to we've increased the allotment of free scans for students, and just trying to make sure that people can still access the collections while being safe.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the work is sort of figuring out how we're going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, kind of similar at the History Center as well. We closed down when everybody else closed down in March, and For a while, nobody really could get into the building. I was kind of going maybe once a week just to make sure a colony of rats hadn't set up camp somewhere. And then maybe in May, some of our archivists who are working with collections and really need to be on site, they got approval to come back on site. We have a decent amount of space. We have kind of a whole floor and then part of another floor. And so we can space out a bit. The whole time we were trying to keep up with emails and doing scans for people and answering phone calls. And then the museum opened up on July 1st. And the library and archives opened up on that day by appointment. Like everywhere, we have reduced capacity, enhanced cleaning procedures. I can say that in the library, we've had a steady flow of people who want to come in and still look at collections. Wow. We have maybe 3 or 4 folks a day when we're taking appointments that come in. And again, we can space people out. And so at least for the library and archives, there's we still have folks wanting to come in, emailing us, wanting to do research. It's a little bit different for the museum. Folks who coming into the exhibits, that's had to slow down a little bit, even with our the lockdown kind of lessening and precautions we have in place. It's clear that folks aren't there yet of wanting to resume normal life and going to museums. And I think it's kind of down everywhere in terms of attendance and things like that. So it's looking forward to this being over. And
you're the only one.
Yeah, I'm weird like that. Popular opinion.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Museums in New York just started opening, and so we've been to a few, and they're pretty lightly populated. But the other thing is, I think we always went on a members' day, and so they shut it down. But it was pretty amazing. We went into the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is gigantic, and they have this, if you don't know it, this giant room with a temple in it, the Temple of Dendur. And we were the only people in the room. And it's like in Manhattan, nothing like that ever happens.
No.
So it was very good. But it's sort of like my record center over there on Long Island. We have a record center, and it's 2 football fields. But I only send 2 people to work a week. And the reason for that is so that everybody doesn't get infected at the same time, and we don't have to shut down everything. And that's the thing I'm worried about. So it's just the weirdest thing, because I mean, literally I could set them up so they never saw each other during the day, but they would, there would still be a risk. And so we pull it back.
Yeah.
Today was the very first day that I hosted a researcher since mid-March.
Wow.
And I have to say, it went fine, but we normally can hold a capacity of 6 at a time in our space. And we've cut it back to 2 maximum. So we're just testing the waters as of today. Yeah. And certainly the project has been helpful for us in terms of knowing what to do to quarantine materials and make it another step that is a safer environment. Right. So before we segue, did you have something to say, Molly?
Well, I was just going to say, as a lone arranger, it's actually fairly well suited. And I normally have student workers, and I'll often have a student from Pitt's graduate program working. And this year, I actually have I'm working with an intern who is working completely remote, which I never considered in the past. And I certainly can't have them working on any processing material, but there's a lot of web archiving that's happening. I can certainly use a lot of help with that. There's always database work. There's so much of what we do can be digital. I mean, there won't be any processing happening, but at least with that intern. But there's so much remote. There's so much work that does lend itself to remote work. Is a little bit surprising to a lot of people.
Yeah, it's been quite the discovery on our end as well, as how productive we've been able to be and maintain over months now. I did let one staff member take some boxes of archival material home, because we just were really hard pressed as to how he could remain productive. And this was such a core project to his work day. But that's worked out really well as well. So,
yeah, I had some staff that they have to stay home sometimes, because we can't have too many people and we don't have any work for them. If you're running paper in a paper record center, I don't have any other solution.
Yeah.
Well, could we send boxes to them? This is what they said to me. I'm here like, what are they going to do with the boxes?
Just move them.
So, but it's okay. You have to work everything out. My goal right now is what we're doing is we're cutting budgets, and I'm trying to cut my budget much more severely than anybody else, because I have the ability to do it. I have a big budget, and I've been trying to cut it for years. So this helps me. And because my job is now to save jobs. That's my only job. So that's what I work on.
And what I'm thinking too, I just want to get through this.
Yeah.
We have a small staff, but it's a great team. And that's the most important thing right now. Yeah.
And how big is your staff, Matt?
We have 7 people.
Wow. That is cool.
Yeah. And so it's a small staff, and that's challenging at times. But the good thing is that we wear many different hats, and we all chip in on reference or helping out with exhibits or even processing. And so nobody gets too siloed doing one thing over and over again.
And Molly, what would you say is the curricular strength at Chatham?
The university as a whole, there's very strong science focus. The health sciences are some of the biggest programs. We have a lot of material in the archives that relates to the development of those programs. So it's really fun to help those departments sort of promote themselves and place themselves within context. There's also a really strong writing program, a strong MFA program, and the Falk School of Sustainability, which is a newer area that's focusing on sustainability. There's building. The Chatham has recently created a new campus called Eden Hall, and it's about 40 miles north of the city. All the buildings there are built with the latest in green building technology, and it's really as being like a lab for sustainable living. So the archives does have a lot, and we do have a focus on collecting those building records to use as teaching tools about sustainable building. But the archives does a lot also with just trying to take the history of the university, it's 151 years now. Last year was our 150th, and so contextualizing the university within the country and things that are happening globally. So the student activity, student political engagement in the 60s, doing stuff now, researching suffrage activity for anti-suffrage activity on campus, because it was founded as a women's college. And so there are a lot of opportunities, and been doing a lot to really try to build the integration with the archives and the class and classes, and that has actually been sort of a newer thing for me as an archivist, to really be focusing on instruction. So we've had some success with the media program, where the students have an assignment to create a documentary film, and it had been based on material in the Internet Archive. But they could also do something using the film from the Chatham Archives, which we have an active digitization project, digitization program going on with those. And also just using the material in archives to try to reach different information literacy goals, and thinking about gaps in historical records, and the first history of Chatham that was written, and which covers the period from the founding in 1869 until 1959. It doesn't mention suffrage at all.
Really?
No.
Oh.
So it's so there are a lot of so it's been really fun to work with faculty and work with students to try to use these materials to integrate with those classes, and to teach research.
Mm-hmm. That's also exciting.
Yeah.
I have to ask you, do you have any nurses' uniforms by chance?
I do.
Ah.
So stiff and starched.
Yes.
It just sits up it's in a box. But yeah, these great pinafores. And I mean, this is, I think the student graduated, the one I'm thinking of, graduated in 1955.
Oh.
And it's just the start, and it's just it's so perfect. Little hat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was approached not too long ago about how to best store nurses' uniforms. And I had my own ideas from a bit of exposure, although at FIT we don't really collect garments in the archives because we have a pretty strong museum on campus, so they have that forte. And so I connected the person inquiring to the chief conservator for the details, but I'd be so curious to hear more about how you store them.
Yeah, well, it's with that one in particular, it's in a box, and there's tissue. I can't remember offhand if it's buffered or unbuffered. I always have to look up which one you use for which.
Right.
But it's stuffed to try to replicate the form, because it's so stiff that one would think it could break.
Oh my goodness!
We try to keep the environment as good as we can, using humidifiers to augment, and always working to try to make sure the enclosures are safe and that there's a environmental or emergency preparedness plan in place. But we do have quite a number of the students in the 60s. Also, freshmen had to wear these little hats.
Yes,
they were called binks. And we have several of those. They had to wear them around their whole first year. And a lot of the students would embroider like the name of their dorm.
Oh wow!
The dorm says Dilworth, so there's one that I have that says Dilworth Dolls, and and so lots of little cute little things. So we pretty much in terms of protecting them, keep them in boxes and the handmade structures to try to keep them within their original shape, so that nothing is really taking too much pressure.
Thank goodness for Ethafoam.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for that indulgence. I appreciate it. So I guess we could move on to how the heck did you two meet as archivists and as a married couple?
Yeah, well, we were in class together.
Ah, there was something about your body language when you were talking about school that made me think maybe that was a possibility.
Yeah, we were started in 2006 at University of Pittsburgh, and I'd say we were kind of like the older kids.
Yeah, we
class.
were.
We're a little cynical. Sat in the back of the class, and we had some other friends that were sort of in the same age bracket, and we were definitely not the crew who had gone right from undergrad to grad school. And so, yeah, we met that way, and we started studying together and doing projects together. And
Yep.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Did either of you study with Richard Cox by chance?
Yes.
We both did.
Yeah.
You
So
very good.
he was head of the program when we were there,
Mm-hmm.
and we had him quite a bit.
Yeah.
We didn't have so when we were going through the program, you didn't really have much leeway in the different classes you took. There wasn't too much overlap with like the library program.
We had one
One elective.
You could either do a field placement or this collections conservation class, but otherwise all your courses were set.
Wow. I don't think I've ever heard of that before. I know there were core courses where I studied, but not more than, say, 4. And the rest were pretty self-determined.
Right.
Yeah, it was very archives focused.
Yeah.
And
Gosh.
So was there any cataloging?
There was an archive, not really. There was an archival representation class where we learned about finding aids, we learned about EAD
Oh, wow.
and metadata, but we didn't have, I think we might have had like an assignment where we talked about MARC. But we didn't, yeah. And there was some point there was a lesson about forming LC subject headings.
Yeah.
But
the title archival representation, that's really cool.
yeah.
Because that's what it is.
Yeah. We worked with like this collection kind of virtually, or it was Texas Breweriana Association or something.
Yeah.
And we kind of like made an arrangement scheme for it and had to justify it. And yeah, it was kind of neat.
Yeah.
That was Karen Gracie taught that class.
And the classes were pretty great. I mean, we had like a museum archives class, and we had an appraisal class, and we had, and it was also one of the things about the Pitt program was that it's 1 year.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So you're done in a year. Other programs where it's 2 calendar years, 4 semesters over 2 calendar years, does open up the possibility for like a summer internship, which we didn't have. But yeah. And I mean, I think when we came out of the program, it was being 2 archivists in a city that has an archives program, and so there's a lot of archivists.
Yeah.
And it's great. I mean, it's a great archives town.
Yeah.
But it was we were both sort of like, what are we gonna, what's gonna happen? And are we both gonna be able to find full-time jobs? And and for a while, I mean, it took 10 years to have full-time jobs because, although, I mean, you had probably when I was at the Warhol, you were probably on grants.
Yeah.
And then you were on a regular position, and I had 2 part-time positions, which there was a point before I got the Chatham position, which was 2014. I felt like if I didn't get that Chatham position, that I was going to need to do something else.
Oh, wow.
Like something was, because I mean, it had been, I did 4 years of, and those 4 years working at the Pittsburgh Symphony and with their collections, I mean, it was great. But they couldn't hire me on full time. And the Mattress Factory also super interesting, contemporary art museum, really great work. I love the work that I was doing there, but again, they couldn't have me on full time. And so, having been in the field for 10 years, and at that point we were married, I got a yoga teaching certificate. Then gave nice. We need to move somewhere, at least I can sort of like try to use that maybe to try to figure things out. And, I feel for all the yoga teachers these days, but it was hard to ultimately. We didn't have to make the decision because Chatham hired me, and we did a lot in those years to. I mean, we did a lot in those years to try to be engaged in the profession. We've both been active in MARAC, the Mid-Atlantic Regional Archives Conference, also an SAA, and a lot of that. A lot of that work was also regional Pittsburgh-based archives groups, to try to, network and try to, make it work. But yeah, I mean, it's people talk about the challenges of the profession with project-based work and how that limits those who can contribute and can find success in the profession. And I definitely feel that.
Yeah. Especially if you're in a town that is inundated with people in the profession, because we have worked in the Albany area. Same thing. It took quite a while for me to find work. But I wanted to ask, were you fixed on staying in Pittsburgh?
Not necessarily. I think I was interviewed outside of Pittsburgh, and I definitely was applying outside of the area. But as a transplant, I really, really ended up loving Pittsburgh. I mean, it's a great town. It's just the perfect size of where you have like cultural amenities and a nice baseball stadium, maybe not team, but all these advantages of a much larger city, but with not the traffic and really high real estate prices. It's kind of a nice medium-sized place, and we like to do stuff outdoors. There's great hiking and things like that nearby. So it's I think people like me, we come to Pittsburgh to go to school, and I think a lot want to stay here.
Yeah, it's a good city.
It really is.
I really, really enjoyed it. The other month I'm working on this big project where I'm documenting every day of my life. Anyhow,
literally,
I may fail because I think my archival resources don't cover the 60s and 70s well enough. But the interesting thing about it was I was looking at the time that we went the last time we went to Pittsburgh. No, the time we went to Pittsburgh to go to the Warhol Museum for that exhibition. I
had loaned some things for the show that were Halston illustrations and from his time at Bergdorf Goodman as a milliner.
Cool.
But yeah, so I had loaned some pieces, and the curator of the show asked me if I would like to come to the opening. And I think it was a courtesy ask, but I was like, I'm there.
She always goes.
I always go.
She always goes. So what happened was all the restaurants we went to have now closed. They closed, and most of them, and they didn't close this year. They closed 2-3 years ago.
Oh, really?
So,
oh, my.
But anyhow, because I actually give precise details of where I was. So I needed the address.
Well, yeah, the restaurant scene in Pittsburgh, I mean, in the before times, really fantastic. I mean,
really was.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up and really interesting. I mean, sometimes when we travel and we'll go and check out to see what are the hot restaurants and I always look for something that's doing something a little bit different, because if it's just a fancy restaurant that's doing interesting new American, that's great. But what I really want is like a new take on vegan Eastern European food, because I'm thinking of Apteca. Like, there's just some really interesting, cool food in Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, it sounds a bit like a passion. So this leads me to my next question, which is for the both of you. What keeps you passionate about your work in archives?
I'll go. I guess I'm fortunate because I don't have to worry too much about that. I'm really engaged in what I do, and I think that's somewhat because of the nature of the organization I work at. So the History Center started off as the Historical Society of Western Pennsylvania, and so it's a local regional collecting repository. And so a little history about the organization. In the 80s, Pittsburgh, there's a lot of closing of steel mills and things like that. And the local history community thought there really should be an organization out there that's documenting not just colonial era or Civil War era, but what's happening right now. And there really wasn't a place like that. The Historical Society at that time was kind of small, and it was didn't really collect artifacts. And so the community at the time thought, well, this is the organization that is best positioned to do that. I mean, there's Carnegie Library that's not really collecting. So there was this effort to kind of like reform or transform the Historical Society. And that's when the Heinz History Center was launched, and with an expanded focus on collecting history from the roots up, from the bottom up, collecting artifacts, collecting on local ethnic communities, business. And so I think that ethos kind of still is present with the History Center. It's very public facing. And we do a lot with student groups, and I guess I have like a short attention span sometimes, and I can really kind of like jump around to different collections.
Sure.
Yeah.
And work with different people, and so that, and it just happened that way. I would have taken any job that would have come along. I was applying to libraries. I was applying to more technical digital librarian positions.
Sure.
I didn't really pick to work at the History Center because of the nature of the organization, but it ended up being a really good fit.
Oh.
And so I think that's what keeps me going.
Great. No, that finding that good fit is, like nothing else. It makes you bound out of bed every day, or at least it does for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I quite bound out of bed.
But he crawls out pretty fast.
Yeah. What's your passion?
Yeah, I mean, I also find the work extremely rewarding, and I'm really grateful that I eventually came to archives, because the 5 o'clock strikes, and I could very easily continue working.
Yes.
And some of the things that I enjoy most, and and these are things that I'm working on a lot these days. Is I'm not a historian, but I love doing historical research, and I love it when I have the opportunity to dig through our collections and try to find and reveal and share some of the stories that are there. I do spend a lot of my time, and I enjoyed this as well, but I do spend a lot of time working with providing access and projects like, making sure that that database records are updated and that that materials being captured accurately from the live web. But when I do get to do some of that research, I could just keep going forever. So there's that. But then I also have found that the work that I do with students, both when I'm collaborating with faculty on an assignment to integrate primary sources into the classroom, as well as when I'm working with students who are library students. I usually, Pitt has a program where library students can work at an institution for a whole year, which it's wonderful because I have a colleague for a year who is actively engaged in the profession and learning about the profession. And we can talk about what they're learning about and how they're experiencing the work in the archives. And I find that work really rewarding. As I see those former interns move on and move out into the field, and I see them at conferences and they're doing amazing work. It's so rewarding. Some of the best feedback I've received as an archivist has been from those former interns when they've reflected back on their time. And so when I hear that they had a great experience, that it helped them with their career moving forward,
The circle is closed.
The circle gets closed. Things are in order, and
another great archivist has been unleashed.
More.
Exactly.
Researchers are going to have access. Research is going to happen. I love doing research. I don't get to do it all, with 100% of my time.
Right.
But the work that I can do that can connect to that, whether that's at somebody else's repository that they're managing, or introducing students to the wonders of research, those are some of the things that really do bring a lot of joy.
That's awesome. It's just been a joy spending time with you today, both of you. I would be not forgiven if I didn't also reach out to you, Molly, to join us sometime if you can for the SAA College and University Archives section coffee chats.
Ooh, I will.
To hear how you've been coping, and your story is so good, and I think it would resonate well with our audience.
Absolutely, I'd love to.
Yeah.
You do realize, Matt, that the college and university archivists are trying to take over, don't you?
I noticed that it's a growing, disturbingly large.
Right.
It's like 90%.
Oh.
Yeah.
There are the CNU people, and then there are what I call the real people.
Oh. Ouch.
It's pretty good. Well, it's a good thing though, because they have so many people. They have a lot of sort of capacity, and they can do a lot more, and they have more ideas and everything, which is really great. Just I used to be on SAA Council, and I had to go to the CNU section once. And I said, "What the heck is this? A whole other conference inside our conference?"
Really?
When I go to my section meeting, it's like 3 people. Sometimes it is literally 7 people around a table.
Oh boy.
The section that I go to. So this was a little bit different.
Yeah, there's about 1,200 in the list for sending emails, mass emails. I was so afraid to hit send the first time because I thought there's no turning back from 1,200 people.
Right. To be fair, it makes sense that it's so big because these are colleges and universities. They're about learning.
Mm-hmm.
Archives are things you need for learning.
Yeah.
It's everybody to learn, but certainly in school you can do that. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, this was fun. It's fun. Thank you for bringing us back from the dead.
Oh, anytime.
Yeah.
He doesn't know I come from a long line of zombies.
Oh boy.
So
good to know.
Anyhow, and thanks again. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you may have come to the conclusion that we have reached the end of another episode of An Archivist's Tale. And strangely, I should be able to confirm that a week from now, which is the time that it posts, the week after this post, there should be another episode. And even the week after that one. And who knows if we can return to our glory days of being a weekly show. Luckily, at least now, we're in full color and video, so you can see Karen's dress. And so with that, ladies and gentlemen, bye-bye.
Thanks again.